then maintenance of command and exercise of command kind of become melded into one thing. We have powerful war-winning forces forward at all times, but these forces aren't big, expensive ships. There'll be some of them because there are reasons we need aircraft carriers, but mostly they're going to be missile carriers, and they can be cheap converted missile or merchant hulls, whatever, but just lots of missiles that can, and a command and control system that can empower those missiles to get to their targets, then that is both combat readiness and forward presence and showing the flag all wrapped up into one. That's where we should go, I believe. I think that it's feasible for the Navy to get there, but I don't know that the Navy is ready to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I keep thinking when people discuss the use of some of these things like LCSs and fairly light ships to provide, quote, a presence, I keep thinking of our Asiatic fleet at the start of World War II. I mean, it was not a powerful enough fleet to accomplish whatever its goal was, and I'm not sure we knew what the goal was, but it doesn't strike me that was a really smart way to do it. And I don't always agree with Admiral Sistak about a lot of stuff, but I think the concept that you just laid out of missile toters, missile carriers, missile barges, I mean, things that the Navy has discussed, and we had can't remember his name, but we had one of the officers, Pete Small, I think from the unmanned surface craft group, come on and talk about some of the aspects of things that they're kind of working on, which I took to include unmanned missile escort vessels, sort of like the aviators have with their smart, whatever the
wingman concept. Yeah.
Loyal wingman concept. You know, you get more bullets out there, and however you do it, that's great. The underlying questions is how well are we reading what the in this case the Chinese strategic goals are? Are they just trying to be a regional hegemon? Do we see that what is their long-term interest that we could look at and say, well, you know, this is the thing we need to worry about most, and when we look into our own national grand strategy, and I'm sitting there making notes, so excuse me while I'm, you know, why are in your Pentagon group there, or your Department of Defense group that would handle this grand strategy with, and I noticed you said in your article about the Air Force being involved, but why wouldn't we have every service involved to help sort out, you know, we don't need to replicate this, you know, we don't need to replicate Army programs in a Marine Corps and all that. Who you know, is that part of the function of that grand strategic group, and how related to that is to what I just asked about the Chinese intentions?
Well, first of all, you know, logically you could bring in a whole bunch of stuff, create a true general staff here. I'm trying to put a Band-Aid over an immediate Navy problem, but when you if you think about it, yes, then a centrally managed strategic staff would necessarily have to be interagency, all the services, joint, you name it, to oversee the development of a comprehensive national grand strategy for security and then execute it. Obviously, but I haven't been trying to do that. I mean, that kind of thing would be good, I guess, but, you know, the problem, our whole system is predicated on distrust of a military guy with too much power. We don't want to rest the total power of the military in some one officer's hands. That's always been the case. Ergo, you have a civilian Secretary of Defense. Now, clearly that Secretary of Defense, there could be the Deputy Secretary of Defense or something like that, could be the, quote, commander, unquote, of that staff. But it is a much different approach to global national security than we've had in the past. So that would be for my part, I'm just trying to Band-Aid the Navy's problem.
Does a lot of this just simply derive from the fact that in the construct that we have right now between the roles and responsibilities of the CNO and the COCOMs and the Joint Staff, that a gap has been created where I don't know if unique is the right word, but particular requirements that it takes to maintain over the long term a naval force, that's been lost somewhere, and that the short-term focus of the COCOMs and their desires and their needs is there's no countervailing force, i.e. the right people aren't in the SecDef jobs who understand it, that are willing to fill that gap. Is this where these problems keep deriving from, is the fact that our structure simply does not account for that?
Right. That's right. Not to get too metaphysical, but our unified command plan takes no account of a single world ocean. The way the unified command plan is structured, the oceans are comm zones between CONUS and the forward areas around ringing Eurasia. From time to time, there crop up problems, security problems, that necessarily are related to a single world ocean. The 1980s maritime strategy was a case in which the Navy kind of stepped outside its box and engaged in global maritime strategy, developing global maritime strategy. I mean, it worked as best it could through the COCOMs and everything and obeyed the law, but the idea, the concept of coordinating the deployment and use of naval forces among the COCOMs originated with Admiral Hayward when he was out in 7th Fleet, but then he became CNO, and that idea kind of took root in the Navy, and eventually its manifestation was the maritime strategy of the 1980s. The second case where a global maritime problem that could not be dealt with by our UCP was in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. The Navy and the Coast Guard had to somehow achieve maritime security for the nation to protect the shore so that terrorists couldn't smuggle or mount an attack on the U.S., a 9/11 style attack, from the sea. And I was part of that. And the problem was, as we war-gamed our way through this thing time after time, we finally figured out you couldn't patrol our coasts. You couldn't actually even develop a defense in depth, starting at the far shore and going across the oceans and finally in close, kind of a scale-up of the Navy's tactical defense scheme. None of that worked, and the Allies weren't buying in. And of course, at the time, we were not everybody's favorite because of the Iraq invasion. So we had to. What we realized was that the only way to secure our shores was to secure all the oceans of the world. All right, that's not a multi-regional thing. That is a single global ocean thing. And so what the Navy did was went about courting international naval cooperation for maritime security, and we did that by kind of arrogating onto ourselves the ability to make statements about national policy, and that's what you see in the CS-21. We said we're strategely defensive. We deploy our forces to defend the system. I outright forbid any talk of globalization, supporting globalization or anything like that, because I didn't want us to seem offensive in any possible way. CS-21 was a statement of the United States adopting a strategically defensive posture to allay the distrust of nations around the world. And sure enough, it worked. In the aftermath of publishing CS-21, the amount of international maritime security cooperation mushroomed. All right, so the 80s maritime strategy and CS-21 were examples of the Navy stepping outside its box, at least slightly, to solve a global single ocean maritime problem. So it will do that when it's necessary.
Well, when I started reading your article, I thought, well, this is really about what happens when your fleet is too small to have command of the sea the way we used to have it. I mean, when I joined the fleet back in toward the end of the Vietnam War, I think we had 750 ships or something. None of them were all, super capable ships, but we had that many things afloat. And we're so much smaller now. The individual ships are somewhat more capable. They can still only control a certain amount of water at any given moment. And I note that early on in your piece, you talk about how you don't think Congress will fund the additional shipping that would warship building that we would need. And I think that's one of the reasons when we start looking at these unmanned ships, they do cost a lot less. Can you kind of explore that point a little bit about why? I mean, can we build our way out of this problem using unmanned or smaller capable ships? And if so, who would be in charge of deploying those things? I mean, we still have the same issues of training and manning and readiness and maintenance of the ships.
Right. I think it's possible, especially if we resort to converting merchant hulls to missile carriers. Not as our total frontline units, but if you use them just to augment the overall force combat power, and that's a problem with the Navy that I've fought for years, is the Navy tends to think ship by ship. And we really should be thinking force level, fleet level power, which is hard to do when your fleet is composed of discrete carrier battle groups, and that's your total offense. If we get away from the carrier battle group as our primary offense capability and go to missiles, now we can start looking beyond individual platforms to the total 7th Fleet or the total 5th Fleet and build that force into a lethal unit in which individual pieces of it are not expendable, but the loss of any individual unit doesn't wreck the whole thing or doesn't take away 30% of your combat power in one fell swoop. Some of that can be unmanned, certainly, but quite a bit of it has to be manned. And maybe it's frigates, maybe it's some kind of glorified LCS, I don't know, but you want a lot of them. If I can't build at least two frigates for the cost of a Burke, then that's the wrong design. Maybe we have, what are Burkes now, 1.6 billion, something like that. What can we buy 4 of for 1.6 billion? And it's not LCSs either, but we ought to be able to figure out some kind of ship that we can build 4 of for 1.6 billion, and that they're lethal because they carry missiles. It's the missiles that constitute the lethality. So I think it's possible to build a numerous Navy if we just get off the carrier battle group is our offense, and we got to have Burkes and Tychos, stuff like that, to defend the carrier battle group, and get on to let's build a bunch of ships that have some seakeeping capability but carry missiles. Then you can do other things with them too. But that's where I think we have a potential for getting to the kind of fleet we need within the budgets that we're projected to have.
Yeah, it's always a fun conversation to have with people on the policy side, usually the civilian types that talk about doing X or Y, and the right after trying to explain to them the fact that